Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Please join the debate by calling 332-263-3300. That's 332-263-3300. And now, Mr. Davis.
Good evening. Welcome to my very cherished friends and participants in this podcast. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a great every day. And let's see if we can make it an even better day through our conversation and debate that will lift our spirits and give us more knowledge than we had coming in, and perhaps some satisfaction to answer the question as to why we aren't the happiest nation in the world. And as much as we are, the U.S. is the wealthiest nation on the face of the earth and all the world. But for some reason, we will attempt to uncover. We're far from the happiest. We're very much far from the top in the evaluation that is made each year of which countries are the happiest. We're number 16 in the world in the chart. Even Israel's ahead of us at number 10. We're down at number 16. And the happiest countries in the world are the Scandinavian countries: Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland. All of those countries that some of us, in order to protect what we say is our precious capitalism, and it is precious capitalism because it's the best system of government, economic, social, political, and all around functioning system in the history of the world. But it has some shortcomings that prevent us from being number one, which we clearly should be. We can hope to have more resources, more of everything. We have more capacity to produce. We have more capacity to invent and create new technologies. But somehow we just can't be the happiest in the world. So let's start at the beginning. Thomas Jefferson said, with regard to happiness, the care of human life and happiness, and not their destruction, is the first and only legitimate object of good government. Government should be judged by how well it meets its legitimate objectives. Good government is that which most effectively secures the rights of the people and the fruits of their labor, promotes their happiness, and does their will. You got that? Government should be judged by how well it meets its legitimate objectives. Good government is that one which most effectively secures the rights of the people and the fruits of their labor, promotes their happiness, and does their will. So, do we meet that criteria? Clearly, we're far from the the safest is we don't necessarily care for human life as much as we should and could, and since that's the first and only legitimate object of good government, we have to analyze why that is. Let me start with some of the reasons. It's because of what we spend on military armaments. That Dwight Eisenhower, one of our great presidents, I didn't think at the time he was president he was that great, because nothing very exciting happened during his 8 years. No wars, no attacks by foreigners. But what he did say, and this was somebody who won the Second World War for us, he was a key general, the most important leader that led the Allies to victory over the Germans and the Japanese. So we have to take heed of his message to us at the time he was leaving government. Most presidents leaving government talk about their accomplishments and how well they did and how much you should appreciate him and our country too. But he warned us, Eisenhower did, and warned the government against the military-industrial complex. We in the U.S. have been fortunate in that we've never had or experienced or suffered a direct attack on our land, our country, and we, despite that, we seem to be in more wars than any other country in the world. So in terms of safety net for our people, yes, we've avoided anybody invading this country directly on our shores, within our shores, but we've lost more people to wars, domestic and internal wars, the gun wars that we're experiencing, or the gun attacks on our people, our fellow man, our school children within the state, within the country, and in foreign wars, we lose our best young people, our future, by entering wars where we have no real business of being involved in those wars or actually leading those wars and launching those wars. And yet we spend much blood and treasure, so much blood and treasure on those activities. So we haven't taken heed of the excellent advice that President Eisenhower Eisenhower gave us at the time he ended his tenure. So let me just find some of the things issues that prevent us from being as happy as we might be. We do have inflation currently, which is a major problem for all the people. We have to deal with and act to remedy that terrible burden of inflation on our people and respond to the outrageously extortionist price of oil and help overcome inflation by addressing that issue, by responding to overcome the prices that are charged by the oil companies to our citizens when we go to the gas station, when we stop at the gas station. I just applied for a loan at my bank, Chase Bank, so that I could. I expect it to come through any minute, so I could fill up my tank. It's a joke, but it's not really a joke. It's really a terrible burden on so many people, so many Americans. I don't expect it affects Bill Gates or Bezos or even Buffett, but it does play a major role in hurting our those at the very bottom of our economic class. So I would suggest, with regard to inflation, that we address the oil companies and particularly OPEC. OPEC, for example, the Middle East. What's the country that spends the most in the United States for military equipment?
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. I always forget that country. I forget it because they punished us with an external tax, the largest in the history of the human beings, by what they charge us for oil by virtue of the fact that they set up OPEC, a cartel, the most successful cartel in the history of the world, that punishes us, all of us, but particularly the United States, but every country that buys oil and gas, by charging a price. Saudi Arabia's cost of drilling and getting oil out of the ground is about $3 a barrel. They've successfully moved the price that we pay up to $120 a barrel. It's outrageous because only 2 years ago, they were so overburdened with the amount of oil they had in storage and coming out of the ground that the price dropped to less than zero. They paid the buyer, the consuming nation, to take the oil. It went to as low as $40 a barrel paid to the buyer, so they could take it off their hands, because every warehouse, every tanker, every storage facility was up to their up to their ears, maybe, in oil. They were drowning in oil. So in order to get it off their hands, they didn't want to stop drilling because, as I pointed out in earlier programs, if they shut down the oil wells, often when they try to open it up again, they don't get the same positive results or outcomes or volume of oil anymore. And sometimes when they open it up, they find that it's almost impossible to get the oil out anymore. So they must keep it open. But instantly, despite that, they didn't like the price being negative or anywhere near zero. They arranged for OPEC and OPEC Plus, including Russia, to cut back by at least 10 million barrels a day. They announced it's 10 million. I'm sure it was more than that. And it's gone up in a straight line, even though we have no evidence that they used any of the stored oil, used up any of the stored oil. that required them to raise the price, but it was a strategic move by the cartel, and they induced Russia to join them. Russia is one of the largest exporter of oil in the world, to join them. Initially, Russia refused, objected, but then they did. And today they're a major beneficiary of the price, because even though they're exporting far less than they did before the Ukraine war, or the war with Ukraine, they're getting more dollars, more income than they were before the war. And that's even though they're exporting less. And that's because their cost of oil is likewise maybe $10 a barrel or $12 a barrel, and they're getting over 100. And the American oil companies just joined. They don't have a cartel, but they join in the prices that the cartel generates, and so we the consumer, Americans, pay that terrible price. So it's feasible that we could overcome that if we took a strong posture. Our government took a strong posture. For example, even if we had to go on rationing just to win that war, it's a war. It's because it hurts every American and puts many Americans into poverty. The people that have to drive to work, that just about make it from week to week, they suddenly are underwater. So there's a way to deal with them. We say we're not going to ever buy a barrel of oil from any member of the OPEC, of the oil cartel, that moves to that meets to fix the supply and the price. By fixing the supply, they actually do fix the price. But we let them get away with it. I don't know where our leadership has been for all these years. Ever since '72, it's been the biggest rape, extortion in the history of the human race. And then where else do we suffer our happiness? We suffer from the enormous number of, look, Independence Day is a day we celebrate. Just, we celebrate the greatness of our country and the greatness our founders did with the Declaration of Independence, insisting and demanding that our leaders, our future leaders, from the time they were the leaders, introduce life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is from the lesson of the World Happiness Report, is that social support, generosity to one another, and honesty in governments are crucial for well-being. World leaders should take heed. Politics should be directed to the well-being of the people, not the power of the leaders, of the rulers, of the people in Washington, or the ones that support them through their donations and during their campaigns. So even though we're a country that's a democracy, that's supposedly ruled by the majority, crony capitalism, the donors get to call what gets the laws that get enacted. So how do we not address this care for our fellow man? As they say, generosity to social support, generosity to one another, honesty in governments are crucial for well-being. World leaders should take heed in the politics and politics should be directed to the well-being of our people, not the power of the donors to our politicians, our elected politicians. Another problem we have is the nature of capitalism, which is obviously, clearly, the most propitious, best form of economic, political, social, governmental system in the history of the world. There's no question that capitalism has done more good for its people and for people throughout the world than any other system developed before it or operate under any other system. As you may remember, Winston Churchill said, capitalism is the worst system of all, except compared to all the rest. It's really the very best system. And yet we've moved to the point where the common denominator of capitalism is profits liberalis, profits even before the concern, the care for life, the disregard of and it demonstrates practices the avoiding the mass killings. It permits the mass killings of our fellow countrymen, women and even vulnerable young school children. And they're devoted primarily to profits. Profits matters more than anything. So the number one thing is of government, the number one role of government is to protect its people. Incidentally, I want to give credit to that quote that piece I just quoted. That was by Professor Jeffrey Sachs, and this is so. What have we become? We've become a nation that instead of the pursuit of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of ever greater GDP, gross domestic product, and ever greater profits. So we don't have the best life expectancy anymore. We don't have the best necessarily social support. That's really why Denmark and Norway and Finland and Sweden are so high, right at the top of the happiness equation or the results. And they have quality of life, not just material wealth plays a huge role in their happiness, but the generosity between themselves, sharing. So we got to get back to that. But let me point out, even on our most precious holiday that we all respect and every year sanctify, we had the event, I'm sure you all, at Highlands, the community in Illinois, outside of Chicago, where 7 people now were murdered, and 30 were injured, maimed, crippled, and several are still in critical condition, and we may see more deaths. And that's because, in my view, because we have so many assault weapons available and guns available to our people. No other country, no other advanced country has any experience like ours. Australia, Great Britain, New Zealand, all had events, one-time events like that, like ours, and they immediately enacted laws and rules and regulations that prevented the mass distribution, particularly of assault weapons, which were developed to fight wars, and their sole purpose is to kill people as fast and as effectively as we can. So, and we have the most assault weapons in our general population than any country in the world, and there's no need. I can't think of any. No sportsman needs it. No hunter needs it. Nobody needs it at home to protect their lives. Even though let me read you something that's right in today's paper. This is living in fear of a concealed gun. It's by Patty Davis, the daughter of Ronald Reagan, who titles the article "How Violence subtitled How Violence Changed My Father, Ronald Reagan, and Our Family." And she goes on to write, 41 years ago, many of you that are older would surely remember that, 4 people were shot by a young man who had concealed a gun in his jacket. This long before mass shootings became a frequent reality of our lives. It was long before semi-automatic weapons became commonplace. There were many good people. There were the National Rifle Association and others constantly repeat. Good people with a gun will stop men with a gun, which in a matter of seconds. Let me get that right. I don't want to do disservice to her article. She writes, I am the daughter of one of those men, Ronald Reagan, who came incredibly close to losing his life because the bullets John Hinckley loaded into his gun were meant to kill more efficiently. One of those bullets blew apart James Brady's head. He's never been the same. And she writes, I have lived with fear of guns, especially concealed guns. Now that fear has expanded to assassins and tactical gear with AR-15 style rifles, storming grocery stores, schools, churches, theaters, any place really, and mowing down scores of people in minutes. It is no comfort that my fear is shared by so many Americans. In fact, that adds another dimension. We are increasingly, as a country, gripped with fear. It weakens us, gnaws at our confidence, makes us more vulnerable than resolute. When the Supreme Court ruled recently that Americans have a right to carry a concealed handgun in public, something froze in me. It won't just be the sketchy-looking guy with a backpack who sets off alarm bells, or the person wearing a big jacket on a blazing hot sunny day. It might also be the nondescript person who barely gets noticed, who suddenly reaches into his pocket for a gun. Sometimes, like John Hinckley, who blended in until he didn't. She writes later in her article, I contacted, I'd run twice a week for 6 years. The schedule was public. Anyone could walk and I was increasingly haunted by the possibility that I could be putting others at risk. One of the threats against me was credible enough that I contacted the FBI. Remember, after Pulse nightclub shooting, sitting in this support group with my stomach in knots, unable to shake how vulnerable I thought we all were. You get jumpy when someone reaches into a bag. Now you get, because of the concealed weapons, now you get jumpy when someone reaches into a backpack, increasingly cause shootings, increasingly because shootings have become so common in America. Almost all of us carry around that fear. We carry around that fear, even if our own lives haven't been yet been touched by gun violence. And then I'll read you something by Evan Tribbles of Highland Park. That's where the 7 deaths occurred on Independence Day. And 7 deaths occurred on Independence Day. And on that very same day, one other massive shooting occurred in Illinois. And around the country, 12 other mass shootings occurred that same day. So where else do we fall short? We fall short in infrastructure, in healthcare. All those countries that I said are the highest on the chart of happiness are all have universal healthcare, so that people. Let me get a caller. I've spoken long enough. Yes, who is this?
Hello, this is Debbie Klein.
Yes, Debbie?
Yes. Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. So I hear you're saying that certain aspects of capitalism you very much appreciate. You think it built this country and is amazing. At the same time, there are parts of it you don't approve of or think is, leading towards happiness, the goal of happiness or rights in this country. I thought the goal of democracy or our democracy was to limit government, like the overseeing of government, and leave it up to the state, so that the individuals, in each state have more power or more decision making based on what's going on to them. Am I understanding right that you
Hello?
should have more individual powers to make their own decisions?
Yeah, is that it?
That's my question.
Okay, that's a good point. And the Constitution, it delegates to the states all the actions, all the governmental activities that are not specifically assigned to the federal government. But there are so many things that the states can't do for themselves and refuse to do for themselves often. For example, the states can't build the infrastructure that Americans need. So much unhappiness comes from being stuck in traffic every day, and the cost of that. Truck drivers are stuck for hours, and individuals going to work are stuck for hours, and even.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
My question is more in terms of what you were just discussing, gun control, and things of that nature. are you talking about how much money is spent on infrastructure? You wouldn't want each state to have a vote on that, question? Have it more state by state?
Well,
So
we
what
we
each
already
state wants?
see what the Supreme Court did. Many states have limited the ability of people to buy guns, to access guns, or particularly to carry concealed guns. Almost every state allows, at the current time, assault weapons to be purchased. So the only way to get it universally under control is for the federal government to take control of it. And
Right, but that's exactly my question to you. My question is, do you want the federal government to have that much control? I thought that's why this democracy was started, because they were afraid of the centralized control of the king, and I could be wrong, in England and all that, and they wanted to rebel against that, and for it to be the United States, not just like America, but the United States, and each state would decide for themselves. So you're saying that it sounds like the will of the people in many of the states is to have these concealed weapons. Maybe there's an argument for that they believe good people having that kind of concealed weapon can kill the bad people who carry it. I don't know, or if the government ever tries to overtake people by getting too strong or socialist or whatever, that people should be able to defend themselves. And, a gun that just shoots 1 or 2 bullets isn't going to do it. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but what I'm saying is you don't believe that states should make their own decisions over these things. It shouldn't go state by state.
Patty Davis, who's the daughter of Ronald Reagan, said there were many guns held by good people around Reagan, more than most any other people in the country ever have around the president. And still, they shot him and luckily didn't kill him. And he changed his views on gun control.
Excuse me, but don't other people argue that the bad people will always be able to, be able to get their hands on the guns through the black market anyway?
Every other country,
like
every country that we're similar to has similar populations. And once they had one event, Australia had one event in '95, a mass shooting, then they changed their gun laws. They haven't had one since, I think they had one last year. So for 25 years, for 25 years, every other country did away with it, and they've never had a New Zealand that had only recently, maybe 2-3 years ago, and they did away with it instantly. England, which is most like us, so it's doable. No other country has this. We're supposedly the safest. We got to give people guns so they could be the safest, and we're the least safe of any country. Look at the facts. You could say whatever you want. And the idea of the government not intruding, they intrude all the time. They just the Supreme Court just said, what do you call it? Dove's my son-in-law. Roe, what is it? Roe Wade. They intruded. They're telling people how to behave with their bodies, how to behave in their bedrooms. That's nonsense. And I'm going to finish on guns, and then I'll have to move on. We have other callers. But the Constitution even says, I can't quote it exactly word for word. I can, but right now I don't want to think about it. But it says a well-armed militia, then the people, all the people have a right to own and carry guns. So why would they preface it with why couldn't they just say all Americans have a right to carry guns for their own safety? They did it under the view that under a militia, just like we have today. What do we have outside of the army that people serve even at universities? What is that?
ROTC.
No, the state the
National Guard.
Guard?
National Guard.
National Guard. National Guard. We have National Guard carry guns, but only under the National Guard. I'll tell you another thing. The guy who had the most guns around him ever was the Muslim guy at Fort Bragg or Fort Dix, that killed fellow officers, a bunch of them, even though they all had guns. It's all around them. It's prolific. So the idea that good people will wipe out bad people if they had guns is ridiculous. Anyway, thank you for your call. Who's on? Hello? I guess.
Hello, Morty. How are you?
Who is this?
This is JJ. How are you?
JJ, how are you?
Yes, sir. I'm okay. A little under the weather, to be honest with you, but it's not COVID.
Good.
Yeah, I want to continue on guns for a minute.
Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you well.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to continue on guns for a minute, and then I have another question for you.
Go ahead. Go ahead. JJ, I'm waiting.
Yeah, they put me in a holding cell again.
No, you're on.
I'm out. Okay, very
Yeah.
good. Okay, so well-regulated militia. Yeah, okay. Right-wing capitalists want no regulation on anything, much less guns. And here's the thing I've been thinking about today, is these mass shootings are happening more and more frequently, and they've been happening for years, and many innocent people are dying. But what's getting eclipsed by this and is the daily shootings. There's more shootings going on individually. There's more murders from guns, hundreds of murders per day in this country that are getting sidelined because of the mass shootings make the press, and they should. I'm with you 100%. We should do what Australia did. This is silly, but it's not gonna. I'm losing faith that anything can happen. What they're doing is putting a Band-Aid on this.
Yeah,
it's a Band-Aid.
I couldn't agree with you more. You know, one of the things they put in is they're going to check the mental health of people, try to get people to snitch on them. That doesn't work, and every other country has at least as many mental cases of young men of that age,
right.
and they don't have, because they don't have the weapons. Even if they have the inclination, they could take a knife and stab somebody. They could take a sword, but they can't do mass.
That's the argument. Yeah, that's the argument. Yeah, it's not an AK-47, right? I'm sick of that argument.
Right.
So the other thing I wanted to touch on with you is how can we get the U.S. to invest in the sort of safety net that other wealthy countries have? How can we breach the divide?
Well, we can't do it if the Supreme Court insists that everybody can carry a gun. They just did it to New York. New York has somewhat strict laws on gun possession, and certainly not concealed weapons that you could carry into the street or into schools or everywhere. And the Supreme Court just ruled that New York can't prevent it because the Constitution gives us the right.
I'm with you there, but what actually I should have been clearer. What I was referring to is a safety net on healthcare and unemployment, like other wealthy countries have. They take care of their people. Most countries, we're not too good with our people anymore.
You're absolutely
you
right.
Agree?
And that's why Norway and Sweden and Finland, all those countries, those Scandinavian countries, are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Even Israel, which has lots of guns because everybody serves in their military, is number 10.
Right.
But they don't have anywhere near the kind of domestic killings of each other So it's,
right. No, Israel has it together. Yeah, they take care of their
yeah,
people.
unbelievable, and we got to stop it. But even though 70% of the Americans are in favor of gun control, the Supreme Court doesn't care. They just say
They're not hearing. They're not listening.
it wasn't right. So
Right.
I agree with you.
All they tell us to do is vote.
As far as healthcare is concerned, they all have universal health care. They have universal free college instead of all our young people today have so much student debt. We're the richest country. We should have health care for everybody. There's no reason not to have it. It should be a human right. Instead, they have a right to guns, but not to health. And
Absolutely. I'm happy to pay taxes for healthcare. I'm happy that it was going toward that.
So am I.
And Social Security.
So am I. And so is Warren Buffett, who says, his secretary is he's the third richest man in America, in the United States. And he says his secretary pays a lower tax rate than he does. So, and they get, and a couple of years ago, in 1917, I think it was, Trump gave a big tax cut. 80% of the tax cut went to the top 1% or 2%. I mean, they don't need it. Bill Gates don't need it. They don't, they say, well, they help build jobs. They help build equipment. They only do it if the little guy is buying stuff, because they don't do it. They have tons of money, and they won't do it unless there's a demand. The demand drives the investments, not the available money.
Absolutely. And I'm with you on education. Education matters. A well-educated population makes much better neighbors to each other.
God bless
you. We'll be much happier.
God bless you. Thank you.
Right?
I talked to you more, but we're finished. Call again.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you.
I will. I'll keep calling.
Okay.
Can I get a Morty? I want a Morty T-shirt.
I'll tell you what you should do. Interestingly, the subject of happiness. I wrote a book called Happiness Guaranteed or Your Misery Back. How to be happy no matter what. If you buy that book, it gives happiness advice every single day. It's 365 days a year. And it's the best happiness book you'll ever read. I promise you. If you don't find it to be true, I'll give you your money back. How's that? And that goes for anybody else.
Fair deal to me.
That goes for anybody else.
Oh, can I get that online? I can order that from Amazon?
Amazon or anybody else. You don't have to go to Amazon.
Yeah, I don't know if I need to make Bezos. Does Bezos need any more of my money? Anyway, I won't keep you.
Okay.
Great talking to you, Morty.
Very good call. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great week, everybody. And I hope I added to your at least your thinking and your consideration of the points brought up during this this podcast. Thank you for listening. Tell your friends about it. Subscribe. YouTube, you can play it, or they can play it throughout the week. All of the past ones as well. I love you all. God bless you. Have a great week. Bye.